The huge room was filled with voices and sounds from many different creatures. Commander Jake Morrison sat in a small chair near the back of the room. He was wearing his best blue uniform with gold buttons. His hands were folded in his lap as he watched the strange beings around him talk and argue. Jake had never seen anything like this place before. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow with soft light. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Creatures of all shapes and sizes sat in chairs that seemed to float in the air. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of rock. Next to Jake sat Lisa Martinez, his security chief. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that never stopped moving around the room. She was watching for any sign of danger. On his other side was Ryan Clark, who handled all their communications. Ryan was young and excited to be here, but he tried to look serious and professional. They had come from Earth in their ship called the USS Horizon. It had taken them 3 months to travel here to this place called the Galactic Council. Jake and his team were supposed to make friends with these alien species and maybe start trading with them. Earth needed new materials and technology, and they had things to offer in return. The room got quiet when a very old creature stood up from a chair that looked like it was made of ice. The creature was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to change colors like oil on water. It has 6 eyes arranged around its head, and all of them were looking at Jake and his team. "I am Elder Vorthek," the creature said in a voice that sounded like wind through a cave. "I have lived for over 800 of your Earth years. In that time, I have seen many species rise and fall. I have watched wars destroy entire solar systems. I have witnessed the birth of new civilizations and the death of old ones." Jake leaned forward in his chair. He had heard about Elder Vorthek from other species they had met on their journey here. The old creature was supposed to be able to see the future somehow. Many beings in the galaxy came to ask him questions about what was going to happen. "Today we talk about these humans," Elder Vorthek continued, pointing one long finger at Jake and his team. "They are new to our galaxy. Their technology is simple compared to ours. Their weapons are basic. Their ships are slow. Many of you think they are not important." A creature covered in thick scales and wearing what looked like a military uniform made a harsh sound that might have been laughter. This was Admiral Zex from the Kurathian Empire. Jake had been warned about him before the meeting. The Kurathians were known for being aggressive and always looking for new territory to claim. "These soft creatures are nothing to worry about," Admiral Zex said, his voice sounding like gravel in a metal bucket. "They barely know how to travel between stars. What could they possibly do to any of us?" Elder Vorthek turned all 6 of his eyes toward Admiral Zex. The room became very quiet. Even the soft humming sounds from the crystal walls seemed to stop. "That is exactly the kind of thinking that will doom you," Elder Vorthek said slowly. "I have looked into the paths of time. I have seen what happens if any of you decide to attack these humans first." Jake felt his heart beating faster. He had not expected this meeting to be about whether someone might attack Earth. He thought they were just here to talk about trade and sharing knowledge. "Tell us what you have seen, old one," said a creature that looked like it was made of living metal. This was Speaker Nexus from the Synthetic Collective. The metal beings were usually very logical and did not believe in prophecies or fortune-telling. Elder Vorthek closed his eyes and seemed to think for a long moment. When he opened them again, there was something frightening in his expression. "I have seen fire falling from the sky," he said. "I have seen worlds turn to ash. I have seen fleets that numbered in the thousands reduced to floating metal debris. I have seen species that ruled the galaxy for millions of years become nothing more than stories told to frighten children. Caused by these humans?" "Admiral," Zex asked, making that harsh laughing sound again. "Impossible. Not caused by them," Elder Vorthek replied. "Caused by attacking them. There is a difference that you must understand. These humans appear peaceful. They speak of friendship and cooperation. They offer gifts and knowledge. But this is not weakness. This is choice. Jake wanted to stand up and say something, but Lisa grabbed his arm and shook her head slightly. She was right. It was better to listen and learn what these aliens really thought about humans. If you attack them first, Elder Vorthik continued, you will discover what they are truly capable of. You will learn that their peaceful nature is not the same as being unable to fight. You will find out that when they are hurt, they do not just defend themselves. They do something much more dangerous. What do they do? Asked a small creature with large eyes and purple skin. This was Ambassador Crix from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. They remember, Elder Vorthik said simply. They remember every injury. They remember every insult. They remember every friend who was killed. And they never, ever forgive. The old creature began walking slowly around the room, his changing skin colors becoming darker and more threatening. Most species in this galaxy fight until they win or until they lose. Then they make peace and move on with their lives. Humans are different. When they fight until their enemies no longer exist. They do not stop when they are winning. They do not stop when their enemies beg for mercy. They stop when there is no one left to fight. Admiral Zek stood up from his floating chair. His scales were turning a dark red color, which Jake knew meant he was getting angry. You expect us to be afraid of these primitive creatures because of some vision you claim to have had? Zex demanded. The Korathian Empire has conquered 47 worlds. Our fleet is the strongest in this sector of the galaxy. These humans have one small world and maybe a dozen ships. Yes, Elder Vorthik said calmly, you should be afraid. Because if you attack them first, you will give them a reason to build 1,000 ships, then 10,000, then 100,000. You will teach them that the galaxy is not a place where peaceful beings can live safely. You will show them that the only way to protect their families is to make sure that everyone who might hurt them is gone. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The old alien was describing humans in a way that he had never thought about before. It was true that throughout Earth's history, humans had always fought hardest when they were defending their homes and families. But the way Elder Vorthik talked about it made it sound almost frightening. Captain Sam Rodriguez, the official ambassador from Earth, finally stood up. He was an older man with gray hair and a kind face. He had been chosen for this job because he was good at talking to people and making them feel comfortable. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Sam said in his calm, friendly voice. We have come here today to offer friendship and cooperation. Earth has no desire to conquer anyone or take anything that does not belong to us. We simply want to be part of this galactic community and share what we have learned with all of you. Some of the creatures in the room seemed to relax a little when Sam spoke. His voice was warm and sincere, and it was clear that he meant what he said about wanting peace, but Admiral Zex was not impressed. Pretty words, he said, but words are easy to say. Actions are what matter. And I think these humans need to learn their place in the galaxy. Elder Vorthik stopped walking and looked directly at Admiral Zex. If you take action against them, you will learn yours. The meeting continued for several more hours, but Jake could tell that many of the aliens had already made up their minds. Some, like the creatures from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, seemed interested in becoming friends with humans. Others, like the Synthetic Collective, wanted to study human technology and maybe make some trade deals. But Admiral Zex and his supporters were clearly thinking about something else entirely. Jake could see it in the way they looked at him and his team. They were not seeing potential friends or trading partners. They were seeing weakness that could be exploited. When the meeting finally ended, Elder Vorthik approached Jake and his team privately. Up close, the old creature was even more impressive and frightening than he had seemed from across the room. Your people seem like good beings, Vorthik said to Captain Rodriguez. "I can see that you truly do want peace. I hope for the sake of everyone in this galaxy that you are able to keep that desire." "We will," Sam replied confidently. "Earth has no interest in fighting wars with anyone." Elder Vorthik's 6 eyes seemed to look sad. "That may not be your choice to make. Some beings only understand strength. They see kindness as weakness and peace as an invitation to attack. If they force you to show them otherwise, the galaxy will never be the same." As Jake and his team walked back to their ship, he could not stop thinking about what the old alien had said. The USS Horizon seemed small and fragile compared to some of the massive ships in the space station's docking bays. Earth's military was designed to keep peace on one world, not to fight wars across the galaxy. "What do you think, Commander?" Lisa asked as they entered their ship. "Do you believe what that old creature said about the future?" 3 months had passed since the meeting at the Galactic Council. Commander Jake Morrison was back on Earth, writing reports about what he had seen and heard during the diplomatic mission. He spent his days in meetings with government officials and military leaders trying to explain what the different alien species were like and which ones might become friends or enemies. But far away from Earth, in the cold darkness of space, Admiral Zex was putting his plan into action. His flagship, a massive warship called the Destroyer of Worlds, led a fleet of 30 ships toward human territory. The Korathian admiral had spent weeks studying reports about human colonies and defenses. He had chosen his target carefully, New Eden was a peaceful farming world located at the edge of human space. The planet was covered with green fields and small towns where families lived quiet, happy lives. Most of the 50,000 people who lived there had never seen a weapon larger than a hunting rifle. They grew food that was shipped to other human colonies and spent their time building schools, hospitals, and parks for their children. Governor Paul Bennett was a kind man in his 50s who had been elected because he was good at solving problems and helping people work together. He had been a teacher before becoming governor, and he still talked to everyone like they were his students. Paul believed that most problems could be solved by sitting down and talking about them calmly. The only military force on New Eden was a small group of soldiers led by Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster. Amy was a tough woman who had served in Earth's military for 15 years before volunteering to protect the colony. She had 200 soldiers under her command, but they were not prepared to fight a real war. Their job was to help during emergencies and keep the peace if people got into arguments. Amy knew that 200 soldiers with basic weapons could not defend a whole planet against a serious attack. She had sent many requests to Earth asking for better defenses, but the government always said that New Eden was too far away from any danger to worry about. They were wrong. Early one morning, Amy was drinking coffee in her small office when alarms started going off all over the base. Sergeant Tony Blake, her communications officer, ran into the room with a look of terror on his face. "Colonel, we have multiple contacts coming out of hyperspace," Tony said, his voice shaking. 30 ships, all of them big ones. They're not responding to our identification requests." Amy dropped her coffee cup and ran to the command center. The main screen showed 30 red dots arranged in attack formation above the planet. She had never seen ships that large before. Each one was 3 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. "Get me a channel to the lead ship," Amy ordered, "and send an emergency message to Earth immediately. Tell them we are under attack." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Amy was looking at Admiral Zex. The Korathian scales were dark red with anger, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow with hate. Behind him, Amy could see other alien soldiers preparing weapons and checking equipment. "I am Admiral Zex of the Korathian Empire," the alien said in his harsh voice. "This world now belongs to us. You will order all your people to surrender immediately. Anyone who resists will be killed. You have 10 minutes to decide." Amy felt her heart pounding. but she tried to keep her voice steady. "Admiral, we are a peaceful colony. We have no military targets here, just farmers and families. There must be some mistake. We can talk about this." Admiral Zex made that terrible laughing sound that Jake Morrison had heard at the Galactic Council. "There is no mistake, human. Your species needs to learn that the galaxy belongs to the strong, not the weak. Your world will serve as an example to the rest of your kind." The communication ended, and Amy stared at the blank screen for a moment. She had trained for many different kinds of emergencies, but never anything like this. How do you fight 30 warships when you have 200 soldiers and no space defenses? "Colonel, what are your orders?" asked Captain Nick Davis, her second in command. Amy looked around the command center at the faces of her soldiers. They were all young and scared, but they were ready to follow her orders. She thought about the 50,000 civilians sleeping in their homes, trusting her to keep them safe. "Send a message to all civilian areas," she said. "Tell everyone to get to the emergency shelters immediately. Then contact every soldier on the planet. We are going to make these aliens work for every inch of ground they take." Meanwhile, in space above the planet, Admiral Zex was giving orders to his fleet. He could have destroyed the entire colony from orbit with his ship's main weapons. That would have been too quick. He wanted the other human worlds to hear about what happened here and be afraid. "Send down the assault troops," he commanded. "Take the main cities first, then spread out to the farming areas. Capture as many humans alive as possible. I want survivors to tell stories about Korathian power." Hundreds of small ships launched from the Korathian fleet and streaked toward the planet's surface. Each ship carried 20 soldiers equipped with energy weapons and battle armor. The invasion had begun. The first landing ships came down near the colony's capital city, where Governor Bennett was trying to organize an evacuation. Paul had never imagined that his quiet farming world would become a battlefield, but he was doing his best to help people get to safety. "Move quickly but stay calm," he told the families streaming toward the emergency shelters. "Help your neighbors, especially the elderly and children. We will get through this together." The Korathian soldiers came out of their ships firing their weapons at anything that moved. Their energy beams could cut through metal and stone like butter. Buildings that had taken years to build were destroyed in seconds. The peaceful streets of New Eden became a war zone filled with smoke and screaming. Amy and her soldiers fought back as hard as they could, but they were completely outmatched. Their bullets bounced off Korathian armor while enemy energy beams cut through their defensive positions. Still, they kept fighting, trying to buy time for civilians to escape. Captain Davis was leading a group of soldiers in defending the main hospital when a Korathian beam weapon hit him in the chest. Amy watched her friend and fellow officer fall, and she felt something cold and hard form in her heart. These aliens had come to their peaceful world and started killing innocent people for no reason except to prove they could. The battle lasted 6 hours. Amy's soldiers fought building by building, street by street, making the Korathians pay for every advance. But energy weapons eventually beat bullets, and alien technology was too much for human courage to overcome. When Amy finally ran out of ammunition and her last soldiers were captured or killed, she was dragged before Admiral Zex in the ruins of the governor's office. Her uniform was torn and dirty, and she had a cut on her forehead from falling debris, but her eyes still burned with defiance. "Your resistance was pointless," Admiral Zex told her. "Look what it accomplished. Your soldiers are dead, your buildings are destroyed, and your people are prisoners. If you had surrendered immediately, many lives could have been saved." Amy spat blood on the floor. "You came here to kill us no matter what we did. At least we made you work for it." Admiral Zex grabbed her by the throat with one clawed hand. "Your species will learn to show proper respect to their betters, starting with you." But before he could do anything else, one of his officers approached with an urgent message. Admiral, we are receiving communications from several human worlds. They are demanding to know what happened here. Let them demand, Zex replied. Soon they will understand their place in the galaxy. The officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, some of the messages are not just demands for information. Earth's government has declared a state of emergency. They are mobilizing their entire military. Admiral. Zex laughed. Their entire military? What can a few dozen primitive ships do against the might of the Korathian Empire? On Earth, President Daniel Hayes was standing in the White House Situation Room, looking at the reports coming in from New Eden. The room was filled with his top advisors and military commanders, all trying to understand what had just happened. General Patricia Woods, the highest-ranking military officer in the human government, was reading from a tablet with a grim expression. Preliminary reports suggest the entire colony has been overrun. We lost contact with Colonel Foster's unit 3 hours ago. Satellite images show Korathian troops occupying all major population centers. Casualties? President Hayes asked quietly. Unknown. Sir, but probably heavy. The Korathians targeted civilian areas as well as military positions. This was not just an invasion, it was a massacre designed to send a message. President Hayes sat down heavily in his chair. He had been elected on a platform of peace and exploration, hoping to lead humanity into a new age of discovery among the stars. Now he was faced with the reality that the galaxy was not the friendly place they had hoped it would be. Mr. President, said Secretary of Defense Karen Wright, we need to decide how to respond. The Korathians clearly expect us to be intimidated by this attack. Hayes looked around the room at the faces of his advisors. Some looked scared, some looked angry, but all of them were waiting for him to make a decision that would affect the future of the entire human race. 1 year had passed since the attack on New Eden, and the galaxy was beginning to notice that something had changed about humanity. What had once been a peaceful species interested in trade and exploration had become something very different. And very dangerous. Captain Ellen Rogers stood on the bridge of her new ship, the USS Vengeance, watching the stars through the main window. The ship was one of 50 new warships that human shipyards had built in just 12 months. Each vessel was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever constructed before, incorporating technology stolen from captured Korathian equipment and improved with human engineering. Ellen had been a cargo ship captain before the New Eden attack, transporting supplies between Earth's colonies. Now she commanded a warship designed for one purpose: destroying humanity's enemies. The change had not been easy for her, but like many humans, she had learned to adapt when survival was at stake. Captain, we are approaching the target system, announced Commander Nick Adams, her tactical officer. Nick had been studying Korathian military patterns for months, learning how they fought and where they were weakest. The information came from prisoners taken during several small battles over the past year. Chief Engineer Laura Thompson checked her instruments one more time. Laura had worked day and night to install the new quantum drive systems that made these ships faster than anything the Korathians had. She was proud of her work, but also frightened by how quickly humans had learned to build weapons of war. All systems are green, Captain, Laura reported. The new engines are running perfectly. We can outrun anything the Korathians have if we need to retreat. Captain Rogers nodded, but she had no intention of retreating. Intelligence Officer Captain Tony Martinez had spent weeks planning this mission, studying enemy communications and troop movements. The target was a Korathian forward base that had been used to supply the attack on New Eden. Tony, give me the situation report, Ellen ordered. Captain Martinez activated the holographic display in the center of the bridge. It showed a star system with several planets, one of which was marked in red. The base is on Kepler 7, Captain. Approximately 5,000 Korathian soldiers and support staff. They have been using this location to coordinate attacks on human shipping routes. Ellen studied the display carefully. A year ago, she would have been horrified at the idea of attacking a base with 5,000 people in it. Now she felt only a cold determination to complete the mission. "Any civilians on the planet?" she asked. "No, Captain. The original inhabitants were killed or enslaved when the Carathians took over 3 years ago. Everyone there now is military." "Good," Ellen said simply. "Begin the attack." Meanwhile, on the Corathian homeworld, Admiral Zex was receiving reports that made him increasingly uncomfortable. The humans had not responded to the New Eden attack the way he had expected. Instead of surrendering or begging for mercy, they had become aggressive and unpredictable. "Admiral, we have lost contact with 17 forward bases in the past 6 months, reported Commander Vrex, his aide. "The attacks follow the same pattern. Human ships appear without warning, destroy everything, then disappear before our fleets. Can respond." Admiral Zex studied the star charts on his office wall. Red marks showed where Corathian bases had been attacked. The pattern was clear. Humans were systematically hunting down every facility that had been involved in supporting the New Eden operation. "How many ships are we talking about?" Zex asked. "Our intelligence suggests at least 50 new human warships, possibly more. They appear to be using advanced technology that we do not fully understand." Admiral Zex felt a small flutter of worry in his stomach, but he pushed it down. The Corathian Empire controlled hundreds of worlds and had thousands of ships. A few dozen human vessels could not possibly threaten his entire civilization. "Double the guards at all remaining bases," he ordered, "and prepare the Third Fleet for a counterattack. It is time to remind these humans who rules this sector of space." But even as he gave these orders, Admiral Zex could not shake the memory of Elder Vorthic's warning at the Galactic Council. The old alien had said that attacking humans first would lead to terrible consequences. At the time, it had seemed like the foolish words of a creature too old to understand modern warfare. On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, Captain Rogers watched as her ship dropped out of hyperspace directly above Kepler 7. The Corathian base was spread across the planet's main continent, a collection of military buildings and landing pads surrounded by defensive weapons. "Scanning the target," announced Lieutenant Sarah Blake, the ship's sensor officer. "I count 20 defensive platforms and approximately 50 small ships on the ground. No capital ships in orbit." Ellen smiled grimly. The Carathians had not expected humans to strike this deep into their territory. They had grown careless, assuming that their enemies would stay on the defensive. "All weapons, target the defensive platforms first," she ordered. "I want them eliminated before they can call for help." The USS Vengeance opened fire with weapons that had been designed specifically to kill Carathians. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, destroying the alien defensive positions in a matter of minutes. Then came the real attack, kinetic bombardment, rounds that hit the planet's surface with the force of nuclear weapons. The Carathian base was wiped out in less than an hour. 5,000 enemy soldiers died without ever seeing the ship that killed them. Captain Rogers watched the destruction with satisfaction, thinking about the 50,000 humans who had died on New Eden. "Target eliminated, Captain," Commander Adams reported. "No enemy survivors detected." "Good work, everyone," Ellen said. "Set course for the next target. We have 16 more bases to visit this month." As the USS Vengeance jumped back into hyperspace, similar scenes were playing out across Corathian space. Human ships were appearing everywhere, striking fast and hard before disappearing again. The species that had once sought peaceful contact with alien civilizations had become the galaxy's most effective killers. Back on Earth, President Hayes was meeting with his military commanders in a bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. The walls were covered with screens showing the locations of human fleets throughout the galaxy. Each green dot represented a human ship on a mission of revenge. "Status report," the President requested. General Woods stood before a large display, showing the current military situation. Operation Payback is proceeding ahead of schedule. Mr. President, we have eliminated 68 Korathian installations in the past 6 months. Enemy casualties are estimated at over 50,000. Our losses? Hayes asked. Minimal, sir. We have lost 3 ships and approximately 200 personnel. The new hit-and-run tactics are proving highly effective. President Hayes nodded, but his expression remained grim. What about Korathian retaliation? They have attempted several counterattacks against our outer colonies, but our new defensive systems have held. The Korathians are beginning to pull their forces back toward their core worlds. Secretary of Defense Wright spoke up from her seat at the conference table. Mr. President, some of our allies are expressing concern about the scope of our response. The Galactic Council has requested another meeting to discuss the situation. Hayes turned to look at her. Our allies? Where were they when New Eden was burning? Where were they when Korathian ships were slaughtering our civilians? Sir, I understand the anger, but no, Hayes interrupted. You do not understand. None of you understand unless you have lost someone to these aliens. They came to our home, killed our people, and expected us to submit. Now they are learning what it means to face an angry human. Dr. Gary Peterson, the head of the Advanced Weapons Research Division, entered the room carrying a secure briefcase. Mr. President, I have the results from the latest weapons tests. Show me. Hayes ordered. Peterson opened the briefcase and activated a small holographic projector. The image that appeared showed a planet being struck by a single missile. The entire world cracked open like an egg, its molten core spilling out into space. We call it the Planet Cracker, Peterson explained. A single missile can destroy an entire world. We currently have 12 of them in production. General Woods looked shocked. Sir, that level of destructive power goes far beyond anything we need for military targets. President Hayes studied the holographic image of the dying planet. The Korathians wanted to send a message with New Eden. Maybe it is time we sent one back. On the other side of the galaxy, Elder Vorthek was living in exile on a small world, far from the growing conflict. The old seer had watched the news reports with growing sadness, seeing his predictions come true exactly as he had foreseen. A younger alien approached him as he sat in his garden, watching the sunset. Elder, the Galactic Council wishes to consult with you about the human situation. They want to know how to stop the violence. Vorthek looked up at his visitor with ancient, tired eyes. Stop it? The time for stopping it was before Admiral Zex attacked their colony. Now the fire has been lit, and it will burn until there is nothing left to consume. But surely there must be some way to make peace? Peace? Vorthek laughed bitterly. The humans offered peace. They came to the council, seeking friendship and cooperation. They were rejected by those who saw only weakness to exploit. 2 years had passed since the New Eden attack, and the sound of human ships dropping out of hyperspace had become the most feared noise in the galaxy. What had started as a simple military response had grown into something that no alien species had ever seen before, an entire civilization dedicated to total war. General Patricia Wood stood in the command center on Mars, looking at displays that showed the positions of human fleets across hundreds of star systems. The Red Planet had been completely transformed from a research outpost into the largest military base in known space. Factories covered its surface, building ships and weapons 24 hours a day. General, we have the morning briefings ready, said Colonel Brad Jackson, her intelligence chief. Brad had become an expert on alien military capabilities, studying every species that had ever had contact with the Korathians. Give me the numbers, Woods ordered, not taking her eyes off the king. Strategic displays. The Korathian Empire now controls only 30% of its original territory, Brad reported. Their main fleet has been reduced by 70%. However, we have identified new targets. General Woods turned to face him. What kind of targets? 17 different species provided support to the Carathians during their attack on New Eden. Some gave them weapons, others provided intelligence, and a few supplied transportation for their troops. Woods walked over to a detailed star map that covered one entire wall of the command center. Red markers showed Carathian territory. But now there were yellow markers scattered throughout the galaxy, representing these other species. Show me what kind of support they provided, she said. Colonel Jackson activated a holographic display that showed supply lines and communication networks. The Drachnari Syndicate provided the energy weapons used to destroy New Eden's buildings. The Vegan Collective supplied the troop transport ships. The Zelfin Republic gave the Carathians detailed maps of human territory. Maps of our territory? Woods asked, her voice becoming dangerously quiet. Yes, ma'am. It appears they had been watching human expansion for months before the attack. They knew exactly where our colonies were and how many people lived on each world. General Woods stared at the display for a long moment. She thought about the families on New Eden who had been killed because these aliens had helped their enemies find them. What is our current fleet strength? She asked. 2,000. Active warships with another 500 coming online each month. We also have the Planet Cracker missiles ready for deployment. Captain Michelle Davis, Wood's aide, looked concerned. General, targeting civilian populations would be a major escalation. The Galactic Council is already calling our actions excessive. Woods turned to look at her. Excessive? They think our response is excessive? Where was the Galactic Council when the Carathians were burning our cities and killing our children? Ma'am, some of these species are claiming they only provided minor support. The Vegan Collective says they thought they were just helping with a police action. A police action? Woods laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. They helped transport troops to massacre 50,000 civilians, and they call it a police action. Dr. Gary Peterson entered the command center, carrying his usual briefcase full of classified weapons data. General, the new antimatter torpedoes are ready for field testing. Each one can destroy a city-sized target completely. How many can we produce? Woods asked. Currently 50 per month from each facility. We have 12 facilities operational, with plans to build 20 more. Woods nodded. Good. Colonel Jackson, I want target packages prepared for every species that supported the Carathian attack. Not just their military bases, their economic centers, their government buildings, their spaceports, everything that makes their civilizations function. General, Captain Davis said carefully, that could mean millions of casualties across multiple species. Yes, it could, Woods replied without emotion. It could also ensure that no alien species ever again thinks it is safe to attack humanity. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the effects of human military action were already being felt. The Vegan Collective's homeworld had lost contact with half of its orbital stations after a visit from human ships. The Drachnari Syndicate's weapons factories had been reduced to smoking craters. Smaller species that had provided minor support to the Carathians were discovering that humans did not distinguish between major and minor enemies. On the world of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Kell of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance was hosting an emergency meeting of species leaders. The small purple alien was trying to organize some kind of response to what many were calling the Human Terror Campaign. We must find a way to negotiate with them, Ambassador Kell said to the assembled delegates. Their response has gone far beyond any reasonable measure of justice. Speaker Nexus of the Synthetic Collective disagreed. Logic suggests that the humans are acting rationally from their perspective. They are eliminating all potential threats to prevent future attacks. Rationally? Ambassador Kell's large eyes widened in shock. They destroyed the Zelfin Republic's entire merchant fleet last week. Those were civilian ships carrying food and medical supplies. Those ships also carried the navigation data used to plan the New Eden attack, Speaker Nexus replied. From a strategic standpoint, the human action was completely logical. The debate was interrupted when an aide rushed into the room carrying an urgent message. Ambassadors, we have just received word that human fleets are approaching the Draknari homeworld. They are demanding the complete surrender of all Draknari forces. The room fell silent. The Draknari Syndicate was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, controlling over 100 worlds and maintaining a fleet of nearly 1,000 ships. If the humans were willing to attack them directly, it meant the war was entering a new and more dangerous phase. On the bridge of the USS Retribution, Admiral Susan Crawford watched the Draknari homeworld grow larger on the main screen. She commanded a fleet of 300 human ships, the largest single force humanity had ever assembled. The mission was simple: eliminate the Draknari Syndicate as a military power. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the planetary government, reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Karen Ross. Put them on screen, Crawford ordered. The image that appeared showed a tall alien with dark blue skin and multiple arms. This was Overlord Vask, the supreme leader of the Draknari Syndicate. Behind him, Crawford could see other Draknari officials who looked terrified. Human Admiral, Overlord Vask said, his voice shaking slightly. We wish to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Admiral Crawford looked at him with cold eyes. The time for peaceful resolution ended when you provided weapons for the New Eden massacre. You have 10 minutes to begin evacuating your civilian population from all major cities. Evacuating? Admiral, surely we can reach some agreement. 10 minutes. Crawford repeated, then cut the transmission. Overlord Vask stared at the blank screen in horror. Around him, his advisors began shouting questions and suggestions, but he could barely hear them. The humans were not interested in negotiation or surrender. They had come to destroy his entire civilization. Overlord, what are your orders? Asked General Drex, the commander of Draknari forces. Vask looked around the room at the faces of his people. Many of them had families in the cities that the humans were about to attack. Begin the evacuation immediately. And send a message to all our forces in other systems. Tell them to run. The war is over. Admiral Crawford watched the countdown timer on her command screen. When it reached 0, she gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All ships, commence planetary bombardment. Target all major population centers and military installations. Leave nothing standing. The attack that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. 300 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Their weapons designed not just to destroy targets, but to send a message to every species watching. The Draknari homeworld, which had been home to over 1 billion people, was reduced to a burning wasteland in less than 6 hours. But the bombardment was just the beginning. Human forces moved through Draknari space like a plague, destroying every military installation, every government building, every symbol of Draknari power. Within a month, the syndicate that had ruled 100 worlds was reduced to scattered refugee groups, begging for sanctuary on neutral worlds. The news of Draknari's fall spread through the galaxy faster than human ships could travel. Species that had never heard of the New Eden attack suddenly found themselves studying human military capabilities and wondering if they had ever done anything that might be considered hostile to humanity. Elder Vorthik, still in exile on his remote world, watched the reports with the sadness of someone who had seen the future and been powerless to prevent it. A delegation from the Galactic Council had come to ask for his advice, but he knew it was too late for advice. Elder, said Counselor Prime Yath, the current leader of the Galactic Council, you must help us find a way to stop this madness. The humans are destroying the stability that has kept peace in this galaxy for thousands of years. 5 years had passed since the New Eden massacre, and the galaxy had become a very different place. The species that had once ruled vast empires now lived in fear of angering the humans. The peaceful explorers who had once sought friendship among the stars had become the most powerful military force in galactic history. President Daniel Hayes stood in the rebuilt center of New Eden, looking at the memorial that honored the 50,000 people who had died here. The planet had been completely rebuilt, but this memorial would stand forever as a reminder of what happened when someone made the mistake of attacking humanity first. "Mr. President," said Governor Helen Carter, who now led the New Eden colony, "the ceremony is ready to begin." Hayes nodded and walked toward the platform where thousands of people had gathered. There were humans from dozens of worlds, but also representatives from alien species who had come to pay their respects. These aliens understood that showing respect for human losses was now a requirement for survival in the new galaxy. Admiral Susan Crawford stood beside the president, her uniform decorated with medals from battles across 100 star systems. Her hair had turned completely gray during the 5-year campaign, but her eyes remained as hard as steel. She was now the supreme commander of human space forces, controlling fleets that patrolled territories larger than the old Carathian Empire. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Hayes began, his voice carrying across the crowd and being broadcast to every human world. "We gather today not to celebrate victory, but to remember the price of peace." He paused and looked at the memorial, where the names of the dead were carved in crystal that would last for millions of years. 5 years ago, the beings who lived here were murdered by aliens who thought humanity was weak. They killed farmers and teachers, children and grandparents, people whose only crime was living in peace on a world far from Earth. The crowd listened in complete silence. Everyone there had lost someone during the war, either in the original attack or in the fighting that followed. "The Carathian Empire no longer exists," Hayes continued. "Every species that supported their attack has learned what it means to face human justice. But the cost of teaching these lessons has been enormous." Admiral Crawford stepped forward to address the crowd. "In 5 years of fighting, we have built the largest military force in galactic history. We have destroyed entire civilizations and rewritten the map of known space. We have done things that our peaceful ancestors would have found horrifying." She looked out at the faces in the crowd, seeing the mix of pride and sadness that had become common among humans. "But we did these things because the alternative was worse. The alternative was letting the galaxy believe that humans could be killed without consequences. The alternative was watching our children grow up as slaves to alien masters." In the crowd, Admiral Jake Morrison listened to the speeches and thought about how much had changed since his diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council. The optimistic explorer who had wanted to make friends with alien species had been replaced by a military commander who understood that peace could only exist when backed by overwhelming force. Standing near him was Captain Ellen Rogers, whose ship, the USS Vengeance, had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Alien parents now told their children stories about human warships to teach them the importance of never provoking a sleeping giant. Dr. Gary Peterson was also in attendance, though few people knew his face. His advanced weapons research had given humanity tools that could crack planets and destroy entire solar systems. The peaceful scientist had become the galaxy's most feared weapons designer. As the ceremony continued, similar events were taking place on worlds throughout human space. The message was being broadcast to every species in the galaxy. Humanity remembered its dead, and it would never again allow anyone to harm its people. On a distant world, Elder Vorthak watched the ceremony through a communication device. The old alien was now over 800 years old, and he had spent the last 5 years watching his prophecy come true in the most complete way possible. A younger alien approached him as he sat in his garden. "Elder, the Galactic Council has asked me to request your presence at another emergency session. They want to discuss the current situation with the humans." Vorthak looked up at his visitor with tired eyes. Another emergency session? How many have there been now? This would be the 15th since the war began, Elder. And what do they hope to accomplish this time? The younger alien shifted uncomfortably. They want to find a way to convince the humans to reduce their military forces. Many species are concerned about the balance of power in the galaxy. Vorthik laughed, but it was not a happy sound. The balance of power? They are worried about the balance of power now? Yes, Elder. The humans now control nearly half of known space. Their fleets patrol territories that used to belong to dozens of different species. And why do the humans control these territories? Vorthik asked. Because they conquered them during the war. No, Vorthik said firmly. The humans control these territories because the previous owners attacked them first. Every world that felt a human forces was taken from a species that had supported the New Eden attack. The younger alien looked confused, but surely the response was excessive? The destruction of entire civilization seems like too much punishment. For providing support to the Carathians. Vorthik stood up slowly, his ancient bones creaking with the effort. Let me tell you a story about the humans. Before they discovered space travel, they fought wars among themselves on their homeworld. Do you know what they learned from those wars? No, Elder. They learned that the only way to prevent future wars is to make the cost of starting them too terrible to contemplate. They learned that mercy shown to aggressors is often seen as weakness by other potential enemies. Vorthik walked to his window and looked up at the stars. The humans did not destroy those civilizations because they enjoyed it. They destroyed them to send a message to every other species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you attack humanity. But the message has been received, Elder. Every species now knows not to threaten human interests. Do they? Vorthik asked. Or will they forget in 100 years, or 1,000 years, when the current generation is gone and new? Leaders arise who think they can do better than the Carathians did. The younger alien had no answer to that question. Back on New Eden, the memorial ceremony was ending. President Hayes gave his final remarks to the crowd and the galaxy. We did not choose this path, he said. We came to the stars seeking friends and knowledge. We offered trade and cooperation to every species we met. But when our peaceful nature was mistaken for weakness, we learned to speak the only language that the galaxy seemed to understand, the language of force. He gestured toward the memorial behind him. These 50,000 people died because someone thought humans would not fight back. Their sacrifice has ensured that no human will ever again be seen as an easy target. Admiral Crawford stepped forward for the final announcement. As of today, the Human Defense Force maintains active fleets in 400 star systems. We have defense agreements with 67 allied species. Our shipyards continue to produce new vessels at a rate that exceeds the output of all other civilizations combined. She paused to let that information sink in throughout the galaxy. This is not because we love war. This is because we love peace. But we have learned that peace can only be maintained by those strong enough to enforce it. As the crowd began to disperse, families visited the memorial to remember their lost loved ones. Children who had been born after the New Eden attack listened to their parents tell stories about the time when humans tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Captain Lisa Martinez, who had been Jake Morrison's security chief during the original diplomatic mission, stood before the memorial with her young daughter. Mama, the little girl asked, why did the aliens attack us if we were trying to be friends? Lisa thought about how to explain such a complex situation to a child. Sometimes, sweetheart, people mistake kindness for weakness. The aliens thought that because we wanted peace, we couldn't fight back. But we could fight back? Yes, honey. We could fight back very well. Too well, maybe. The little girl looked up at her mother with curious eyes. Will the aliens attack us again? Lisa looked around at the memorial, at the names of the dead carved in eternal crystal, at the human ships patrolling overhead. No, sweetheart. They will never attack us again. Meanwhile, in his command center on Mars, General Woods was reviewing the latest intelligence reports. Colonel Jackson had information from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. General, our intelligence indicates that several species are attempting to form a defensive alliance against human expansion, he reported. Woods looked up from her reports. Which species? Mainly smaller civilizations from the Outer Rim. They are concerned that human forces will continue expanding beyond territories taken from our enemies. Are they planning any hostile actions? No, ma'am. Just defensive preparations and diplomatic coordination. They seem to understand that attacking us would be suicide. General Woods nodded. Good. As long as they stick to defense and diplomacy, we have no quarrel with them.